Hey, welcome to another episode of Midweek Worship. My name's Jeff, and we're Two Cities Church. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to start a brand new study. Before we roll up our sleeves and get into this new theological topic, let me just remind you that if you want to know more information about what we're going to talk about today, you'll see some notes in this episode right there in this post. Why don't you just check out those notes? Maybe you've never seen this broadcast before. Maybe you don't have any idea who we are or where we are or why we do this. Well, you'll also notice that in those notes, there is a link to a YouTube video. When this is over with, if you'll check that video out, it's only a couple of minutes long. It will tell you more about where we're located and why we do this broadcast to help you understand the basics of the faith. As I said a moment ago, we're going to start a new study. Now, what we've been doing over the past couple of months is we've been looking at our relationship with Jesus. And we have seen how that relationship with Jesus impacts his church, the people in the church. We've also seen how it impacts the church and the way that the church relates to people in the community. Man, we've covered a lot of details. Well, today I want to start to describe a Bible word. Now, I need you to know that this word gets used in the modern English language a lot, but the way that we use this word in the modern English language is not at all what it means in the Bible. And so actually, we're going to spend 4 weeks understanding this Bible word because you're going to have to reprogram your brain a little bit if you're not familiar with the way that the Bible uses the word justify. In fact, I'll put it on the screens. What we're going to learn today and for the next couple of weeks is about justification by faith. Now, this is one of the big concepts that all Christians, all time, all over the planet, no matter where they come from or what kind of denominational background, we all agree on. How exactly this works, not everybody agrees, but we all agree this is the way that people relate to God. So today what we're going to do is we're going to dive into what this thing is and why God gives this free gift to people like me and you. Free gift to sinners. You heard correctly. I just called myself a sinner and I lumped you into that category too. I'll tell you more about that in just a second. Next week, we'll talk a little bit about the courtroom language that this word describes. The following week, we'll talk about why God is able to and willing to accept people that don't deserve it. And then the final week is Jesus's role in our justification. Now, you use this language all the time. In fact, you hear this language all of the time. People explain their actions by justifying themselves. They use this word to describe why they did what they did. That's not far off from what the Bible means by this word, but it's not exactly what we're talking about. When we say justify, we're not talking necessarily about God explaining his actions. There's actually much more going on behind the scenes with this Bible word, justification. And I want to make sure that you understand each week what we're talking about is justified by faith. The reason I included those last 2 words, I could have just put justification as the title for these 4 words, but these 4 weeks. But the reason I put justification by faith is so that you don't understand or misunderstand, I should say, the difference between Christianity and all other faiths. In fact, I don't like to lump Christianity in with the other faiths because it is radically different. In virtually every other system of faith out there in all of history, there has been something that you had to do in order to earn the approval or earn the blessing of a deity. Christianity is radically different from that. Christianity is not about doing. It's about believing, and it's actually not just about believing, but it's about believing to the point that you become what you believe, which is radically different. So every time over the next couple of weeks that you hear the phrase by faith, I want you to think, okay, this is different than the way that all of the other false religions out there function. So let's talk about God's free gift to sinners. Because in order for it to genuinely be justification, God is doing something for people like me who I could not do for myself. And it has to be God that's doing the action, because if I could do it for myself, then there's no need for God to do it. Well, justification by faith is God offering something that I don't deserve. Notice, this is God's free gift to us. He's doing something and giving something to us that we couldn't do for ourselves, we couldn't get for ourselves, meaning you cannot earn this. And that's why this is different than all of the other faith traditions in human history. His free gift to sinners is described for us in the Bible book of Romans. Now, Romans talks a lot about justification. You're going to see that word a lot, but in Romans chapter 4, it tells us how this thing works for sinners. And I referred to myself as a sinner, and I referred to you as a sinner a few minutes ago when this broadcast started. And I did that because that's exactly what the Bible says. It says that if anyone claims to be without sin, this comes from the book of 1 John, you are a liar. That would mean if I claim that I have no sin, then I'm already a liar before God. And by the way, to lie is to break one of the commandments, which itself is a sin. But I don't need 1 John, because Romans tells us earlier in this Bible book that all of us have sinned. And then it tells us what sin is. It's falling short. It's missing the mark. It's not living up to God's standard of perfection. And if you're thinking to yourself, I'm a pretty good person, I'm a lot better person than my neighbor, you probably are, and I absolutely agree. However, God's standard that He measures with is Jesus. If you don't live up exactly in your actions and your attitudes to Jesus, then you and I don't measure up. And looking back over the course of human history, nobody's been able to live up to that standard. That's why the Bible can say all of us have sinned. We have all fallen short of the standard that Jesus set for us. But God didn't leave us that way. Romans chapter 4 tells us about why and how He justified us. I'm going to read verses 4 and 5 for you in just a second. I'm going to put them on the screens, but we challenge people to memorize the Bible. And the reason we challenge you to memorize it is so that you can think about it, meditate on it while you're driving, while you're in the checkout line of the store, while you're pumping gas. So here's what Romans chapter 4, verses 4 and 5 say. When people work, their wages are not a gift, but something that they have earned. But people are counted as righteous, not because of their work, but because of their faith in God who forgives sinners. This comes from Romans chapter 4, and it's verses 4 and 5. Now, really, it's verse 5 that I wanted to drill in on, but verse 5 really doesn't make sense if you don't have verse 4 there. And verse 4 is reminding us, if you earn this, then it's basically God giving you a paycheck. But because you and I can't earn it, we can't say that we deserve it, and therefore it becomes a gift, a free gift of God, meaning you can't purchase it. And the word free also means not only could I not earn it or purchase it, but nobody's forcing God. He is free to do with His gifts whatever He wants to do. Nobody is forcing God to give me this gift. I was trying to think of a modern example of what this would be like. And almost everywhere in the world, people today have the ability to take some PTO, some personal time off. You probably are aware that it wasn't always this way. In fact, for centuries, people worked like slaves and got a bare pittance for it. I don't even know if that's a real word, but they were barely paid for what they got. They were able to just have enough food on the table to survive one more day. And eventually, companies, especially in Europe, in the 18th and 19th century, started to realize maybe we ought to treat people a little bit better if we want them to give their best to us in work. And then we should maybe take better care of them. I did some research, best that I can tell. First time that this really shows up legitimately in the United States. You know, we're a little bit slow when it comes to taking great care of people. Is a company about 150 years ago called U.S. Steel. Now, U.S. Steel was a massive corporation. It was one of the big major employers in the United States. It was one of the titans of industry, essentially. The steel industry was at its height, and U.S. Steel was at the top of the steel industry. And in the early 1900s, some of the leaders at U.S. Steel said, maybe we should start offering people a chance to take a break from work when they needed to take care of something personally. This was groundbreaking because before this, people said, I'm your boss, you work for me, I tell you what to do and you do it, and it doesn't matter if you have a personal life and personal problems. When U.S. Steel did this, every other company in America looked at him like, you guys are crazy. Why are you giving people the chance to tell you that they're not going to come to work because they have personal issues? And U.S. Steel's argument, their logic was, if we take good care of people, then maybe those people, when they come back to work after some personal time off, PTO, will actually work harder. And sure enough, they did start to work harder. And now, I don't know that you can find a company anywhere that doesn't offer people, in fact, I think it's U.S. law that you have to offer people some PTO, some personal time off. When this was first done, it was a gift, and it was a gift that everybody else in business thought, you guys are crazy for doing stuff like this. You see, this gift, the employees didn't earn it. The company gave it to them. They even gave them the chance to take time away when they were supposed to be at work for personal reasons. And it was the company's way of saying, I care. I genuinely care. And by the way, we want you to work harder when you come back. God has no ulterior motives. His free gift to sinners, his justification, comes by faith. And if you're really paying attention right now, you might be scratching your head and saying, wait a second, Jeff. You just said that it's free. But you also said that it requires some faith. And I want to put a question on the screens. The way that we typically wrap this broadcast up is putting a thought-provoking question on the screens that causes you to think through putting what you hear into practice or think through the deeper truths of what you hear. And the question that I want to put on the screens for you today is this. If it's a free gift, why do you have to have faith? And when I say have to have, I know that that's a little bit weird language, but really what it's saying is, why does it cost me anything if it's a free gift? And if you will do some thinking through this, you might find that faith itself, according to Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8, is a gift. That you might find that God blesses people so that they can respond to him in faith. If you dig a little bit deeper, you might find that not only is the gift free, but the faith is free too. Just something for you to think about as we wrap up this episode. See you back here next week where we pick up the discussion about justification by faith. God bless.